I have a friend who grew up in a Chinese household. Both her parents were Chinese, actual immigrants born in China, came here. And just in our conversations sometimes she'd say, oh, that reminds me of an old Chinese proverb my dad used to say. And then she'd say it, and I thought, that sounds a lot like the Irish proverbs my dad used to say. You know, some of those sayings are kind of universal. If you don't have something good to say about somebody, don't say anything at all. We all know a lot of these are truisms. You know, as much as I didn't like hearing that when I was a kid and saying something mean about my brother, it was true because when I was a counselor at Camp Howard and two kids were yelling at each other, I pulled them apart, and what came out of my mouth without even thinking about it? If you don't have something good to say about it. And I went, oh my goodness, what's happening? That one also, this is kind of a little bit of an aside, but in that movie Steel Magnolias, Olympia Dukakis plays a character who she's at a party, you know, and everybody's gossiping, and she says, if you don't have something good to say about somebody, you come over here and sit right next to me. I want to hear it. You know? But we know, you know, what the truth is. There's a truth behind all of that. And in the scriptures, there are also collections of Proverbs. I mean, the book of Proverbs, obviously. This book is really just a collection of old sayings from the Hebrew tradition. And some of them are lost. We haven't heard them, or they're not as common, but some still come up. You know, the one that I often hear is how, you know, when you in a community you rub up against each other and there's a little bit of tension, but you know, actually you end up learning something because iron sharpens iron. That's from Proverbs. Iron sharpens iron. You know, sometimes that friction is what's good for us. So I thought it'd be good just to look at some of these Proverbs that we heard today. Again, it's not a particular narrative, but or even a collection that is meant to go together like one builds on the other. You will find those kind of Proverbs where they are sort of sequential in the book of Sirach. These are both examples of the wisdom literature in the Old Testament. So the Old Testament has a lot of different genres of literature. Some of the historical books or the Pentateuch, the beginning, the history of the dynasty of King David and Kings. Those are more like history books, not history in the modern sense of history, but historical narratives that say something about God's interaction with his people. And then there's also writings of the prophets and those kind of teachings. But the wisdom literature are more collection of wise sayings or parables, stories that are instructive, like the book of Esther, you know, that are instructive about the way of life and living with integrity. So these Proverbs are like that. And just to look at them a little bit more, here's one of them. I'll just take a few of them. To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. I mean, we can look really good at religious stuff, you know, go to church, do all the bowing and the genuflecting and kneeling, but if it doesn't change the way we live, then what's that about, you know? But to do the right and just thing, that is more worthy than just an empty sacrifice. So it's a great thing. The plans of the diligent are sure of profit, but all rash haste leads certainly to poverty. Let me say that again. The plans of the diligent are sure of profit, but all rash haste leads certainly to poverty. Sounds like investment advice, which, you know, could be that, but it's also just, you know, it's better to think things through. You know, if you're going to build a house or a table, think it through, because you're going to waste a lot of money if you don't have a good plan. And you'll end up with a lot of extra lumber, you know. Yeah, I see that in contractors. When they build a little project, sometimes they only have a couple tiny pieces of scrap wood left over. If I'd have done it, I'd have all the pieces that I ruined, and then I bought way too much lumber than I needed. So that leads to poverty. Here's one that I thought was particularly delightful. Let me see, where is it here? Oh, yes. Whoever makes a fortune by a lying tongue is chasing a bubble over deadly snares. You know, that notion of a little kid chasing a bubble and, whoa, where's the bubble? And they're not looking down. And, you know, they're deadly snares, like traps or a cliff you could fall over. Well, that's what it's like if you try to make your fortune by lying, by dishonesty, by deception. Well, it's going to catch you. Eventually, it's going to catch you. It's like chasing a bubble over deadly snares. Or this last one I'll mention. He or she who shuts their ear to the poor, to the cry of the poor, will himself also call and not be heard. You know, another way that has been, you know, is you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But if you're deaf to the poor, you don't really care to help anybody else, well, then when you cry out, you shouldn't expect anybody to respond to you either. So they're just, he who shuts his ear to the cry of the poor, he himself will call and not be heard. As we listen to those, I mean, they shouldn't just be wise sayings, but let's follow on what Christ said. Who really is my mother and brother? Those who hear those things, those teachings of God, these wise sayings, the 10 Commandments, the love your neighbor, to do good to those who persecute you, to pick up your cross, to actually do those things that Christ calls us to. That's what draws us into communion with our Lord and makes us brother and sister and mother to him.